Stocks closed mixed on Wall Street ahead of the non-farm payrolls data expected later today. The S&P 500 retreats after hitting record highs, while the Nasdaq closes with minor losses. The Pan-European Stock 600 also closes at a record high after the European Central Bank cuts rates for the first time since 2019. Asian markets are mixed this morning, while the GIFT Nifty is suggesting a flat start for the Indian markets. Crude prices gained for the second straight day. Brent rallies to over $80 a barrel as the European Central Bank cuts rates and hopes rise of the Fed following suit. Gold prices hit a two-week high at near $2,400 an ounce. Silver gains about 0.5%. The RBI's Monetary Policy Committee will announce its rate decision later today. The CNBC TV18 Citizen MPC sees the central bank holding rates at 6.5%, with stance remaining unchanged at withdrawal of accommodation. And the new NDA government is likely to be sworn in on the 9th of June. Sources say that allies JDU and TDP want a common minimum program and about 4 cabinet berths each. The BJP, though, is likely to retain the speaker's post. Hello and welcome to the CNBC TV18 HDFC Sky Election Headquarters. You're watching a brand new edition of Power Breakfast in the Mumbai News Center. I am Hormuz Fatakia. It's the final trading day of the week, and what a week this has been for the markets with all the topsy-turvy action that we've seen. We'll bring you all of that in the next 30 minutes. But first, let's take a look at how the Asian markets are faring. It's a mixed start to the trading day, as we just highlighted. Most of the Asian indices are also rather flat after the week that has been. The Hang Seng is also flat, as is the Taiwanese index. The Hang Seng, though, trades with a slight positive bias. The Taiwanese index is flat but trades with a negative bias. Now, we are awaiting some trade data emerging from China, so that is the one that's going to be in focus. So mixed cues emerging from Asia, but all eyes on the China trade data. Pull up the GIFT Nifty as well, and that is also suggesting an extremely flat start for our own markets. The implied open is suggesting a 23.5 point uptick. So considering the week that we have had, we would appreciate some consolidation on the final trading day of the week and ahead of a major event as well. But moving on to Wall Street now, that session, the benchmark indices ended mixed on Thursday. The S&P 500 ended just below the flat line, retreating from its recent highs. The Dow Jones outperformed. It gained 80 points, while the tech-heavy Nasdaq also ended with a marginally negative bias. The investors are now awaiting non-farm payrolls report for the month of May, which is due to be released later this evening, as will give more clarity on whether the Federal Reserve will start lowering interest rates later this year. Now, Citi is expecting that the report will show just 140,000 jobs being added, with the unemployment rate hitting 4% for the first time since January of 2022. CNBC's Kate Rogers gets us a wrap of all the action on Wall Street.
Markets ended the day mixed, with the S&P closing marginally lower as traders wait for May's jobs report, which could provide some clues for when the Federal Reserve will start cutting interest rates. The Dow up 79 points, the S&P 500 fell just 1 point, the tech-heavy Nasdaq lower by 15. The Federal Trade Commission and Justice Department are set to open antitrust investigations into Microsoft, OpenAI, and NVIDIA. A source tells CNBC they will look into the powerful tech companies' influence on the booming artificial intelligence industry. The source also says the FTC will take the lead on any probes into Microsoft and OpenAI, while the DOJ will focus its efforts on NVIDIA. The New York Times first reported on the investigations. SpaceX put its Starship mega rocket through its 4th test flight this morning. The Starship lifted off from SpaceX's test site in Texas, but some pieces of the spacecraft apparently burned off as it traveled through the atmosphere, and it's not yet clear how much of the ship survived re-entry. But mission controllers confirmed that the vehicle completed the key burn. If it becomes operational, the Starship system would become a new method of flying cargo and people beyond Earth and eventually to the Moon and Mars. The flight came hours before Boeing's Starliner docked at the International Space Station following its launch on Wednesday. That's what's happening here in the U.S. Back to you in Mumbai.
Let us also now listen in to some important market opinion coming in from experts on the inflation trends and the expectations of a rate cut by the U.S. Federal Reserve.
I think it all comes down to inflation and how the inflation data come out over the next several months. So we actually have a baseline forecast of 3 cuts this year, so that's more than what the market's pricing. And we think what's going to happen is we'll get CPI next week. We think that's going to show further disinflation. It's going to reinforce the idea that the first quarter high inflation data were noise and not signal. And then that's going to get the Fed more comfortable. And then as we get another couple months, by the time we get to the September meeting, we think the Fed will be ready to cut.
For the Fed, of course, the economic momentum is slowing down. So US economists are worrying about the rollover in employment data, right? So we'll be watching what is happening, the update on payrolls tomorrow very closely. And they actually think that there is still a chance for the Fed to start cutting in July if this weakness in the labor market continues.
Moving across the Atlantic to Europe now, and European markets closed higher on Friday, and they were boosted by tech and banking stocks after the ECB cut interest rates for the first time in 5 years. The French CAC was up about 34 points, the German DAX gained close to 80 points, while the British FTSE settled close to 40 points higher. Now, the big cue coming from the region, as I mentioned, the European Central Bank cut rates by 25 basis points to 3.75% from the earlier 4%. The ECB, however, hiked its inflation forecast for 2025. Now, President Christine Lagarde reiterated that they will not pre-commit to a rate path and stressed on data dependency. Listen to what she had to say.
We did so because overall, our confidence in the path ahead, because we have to be forward-looking, has been increasing over the last months. We are determined to ensure that inflation returns to our 2% medium-term target in a timely manner. We will keep policy rates sufficiently restrictive for as long as necessary to achieve this aim. We will continue to follow a data-dependent and meeting-by-meeting approach to determining the appropriate level and duration of restriction. In particular, our interest rate decision will be based on our assessment of the inflation outlook in light of the incoming economic and financial data, the dynamics of underlying inflation, and the strength of monetary policy transmission. We are not pre-committing to a particular rate path.
And that's all we have on the global market action. But how will all of these overnight cues impact our own markets? We have our research team joining in with how the trade setup looks like, the stocks that are likely to be in the news, and the F&O cues that you need to watch out for this morning as well. It's been a topsy-turvy week, if I can call it that. Last week, we made a record high and then ended the week lower. This week, we fell the most in 4 years in a single trading session, and we are up for the week. So it's been that kind of a market. You can see that the Nifty, the range that the Nifty has had, almost 21,200 on the downside, and the record high that we made, 23,300 earlier in the week, that is still some distance away considering the fall that we saw on Tuesday. So we are still covering some ground, but we are still positive for the week since we closed above Friday's high of 22,530. Now, some important levels, of course. Yesterday's high is an important one to watch because we faced some resistance at 22,900. 24th May's close is important, 22,957, because that is where we will reverse the losses that we made from last week as well. So that is an important level to watch. And of course, the psychological level of 23,000 on the upside. The Nifty Bank has been the underperformer. Yesterday also it faced some resistance at 49,600, but it has managed to hold on to the 49,000 mark. So the bulls would take some comfort from there. For the week, as I mentioned, the Nifty is up over 1%, but the Nifty Bank is absolutely flat. It's the underperformer. The banking stocks putting some pressure, but the Nifty is up considering help from IT stocks. But the broader markets, though, are still facing the brunt of Tuesday's fall. The mid-cap index is still down close to 1% for the week. The small-cap index is down 2.5%. So there's a lot of ground to cover for these indices as well. The outperformers yesterday, Realty, PSUs, they still continue to rebound, covering more ground that they lost on Tuesday. But the underperformers, FMCG was the star on Wednesday's trading session, but then it fell to some selling pressure yesterday as well. Some of the important cues emerging, of course, the RBI policy outcome later today, the crucial NDA meet, the government formation becomes more clearer, and of course the non-farm payrolls data. The GIFT Nifty is also indicating an absolutely flat start for our own markets as well. Now over to Vamakshi, who would list out the stocks that you need to watch out for in today's session. Vamakshi, good morning.
Well, good morning, Hormas. Let me first start off with ICICI Bank. SEBI has issued an administrative warning to the bank on outreach undertaken by the bank for delisting of equity shares of ICICI Securities. SEBI says that the outreach program was inappropriate. PPP Fintech also in focus, and that is because its chairman and CEO Yashish Dahiya has received a show cause notice from SEBI, and this is on 2 million investment made by its Dubai unit for acquiring nearly 26.72% stake in YKNP Marketing Management. Bajaj Finance and Bajaj Bajaj Finserv also on our radar, and that is because Bajaj Housing Finance's board has approved the IPO. This comprises of a fresh issue and offer for sale, and the IPO is expected to have a fresh issue of around 4,000 crores. RVNL also on our radar. They've received a letter of award for a project worth almost 495 crores from NTPC. Tata Chemicals, however, could be under pressure today, and that is because UK's Chester Crown Court has ordered Tata Chemicals to Europe to pay around 1.1 million GBP of fine. Hero MotoCorp, the board has approved purchase of additional shares up to 2.2% of Ather Energy for 124 crores. Tata Steel NCLT has approved merger of Bhubaneswar Power into Tata Steel. Nasdaq has introduced ICX Pro platform with NVIDIA AI Enterprise. IRB in focus as the company announces a nearly 30% jump in its May toll collections. All cargo terminals also on our radar. They've gone ahead and signed an MOU with Kensis terminal, container terminal, and this is to operate KCTL's container freight station at Chennai for business as well as capacity expansion. HUDCO has signed an MOU with India Infrastructure Finance Company to manage projects. And lastly, let's also focus in on rights. They've received a letter of award worth almost 40 crores for loco hiring along with operation and maintenance from Tata Steel.
Interesting list of stocks there, Vamakshi. Thanks a lot for joining in. And lastly, we move over to Nigel, who's joining in with cues from the FNO space. Nigel, good morning. It's been an absolutely topsy-turvy week. What's the setup looking like?
Well, I think, Hormuz, you were mentioning that the RBI governor is likely to pause, right? I don't think it's a bad idea for most traders out there as well. Take a bit of a pause, take it easy today, and take your fresh course of action from the following week itself. Now, what I expect is stock-specific action to continue. On the headline index, I think, a bit of consolidation won't hurt anyone. And yesterday's trading session as well, just take a look at the screen. That's telling you it's getting more and more stock-specific. If you look at the Nifty, well, it did well, but you had the mid and the small caps did better. And the Nifty next 50, in fact, did even better than the Nifty. It was up closer around 2%. So it's getting more stock-specific. In terms of the flows, I just want to make a quick point out here. If the net institutional flows crosses 3,000, 2,500, 3,000 crores odd, it's very difficult to rally from here on. Yes, we got away with around 200 points odd, but otherwise rallying when you're seeing net institution sell number at around 2,500, 3,000 on is going to be rather difficult. What did the FIs do in yesterday's trading session? Well, they lightened their positions both on the long as well as on the short side. Though on the short side, they covered a higher number of contracts, close to around 33,000 contracts odd. What does this bring the FI net short positioning to? Well, it's come down. A few sessions ago, it was at around 3.55 lakh contracts. That's come down to around 2.87 lakh contracts. So that's, some bit of short covering has taken place, though they're still net short. But on the client side, we have mentioned this for the last few days. They have been net long on the index, though they have skimmed down some of their long positions. Just keep that in mind. Levels that I'm looking at, well, they come up for you on the screen. Yesterday's high, that becomes a bit of a resistance. We need to cross that to get past the 23,000 odd mark. Till we hold above the 20 and 50 DMA, the bulls will still believe that they have this covered. But I think it's still going to be very much stock specific. Back to you, Hormuz.
A bit of consolidation did no harm. Words of wisdom from Nigel this morning. A time for a short break. Up next, we get you what to expect ahead of today's RBI monetary policy decision. Stay tuned. Back on the other side. Welcome back. It's the day of the RBI monetary policy, and all the economists polled by CNBC TV18 are expecting a status quo. Now, the street is also expecting the RBI to maintain its stance of withdrawal of accommodation. Ritu Singh is here with the CNBC TV18 monetary policy poll.
This is a bit of a wait and watch policy because it is squeezed in between the Lok Sabha elections that just happened and the budget that is going to be presented in July. But more importantly, with a strong growth print, inflation still above target, and the US Fed also not itching to cut rates, there is no compelling reason for the RBI to move on rates just yet. So this time around, the markets are going to focus on what the central bank says about these two things. The first is liquidity, with systemic liquidity continuing to remain in deficit, and the government's surplus cash balance as the elephant in the room, and on inflation, with that road to the last mile of disinflation taking a tad longer than expected. But that said, no one is expecting any change in the repo rates, so a status quo policy for the 8th consecutive time, and no change in stance either, which is likely to be left at withdrawal of accommodation. Now, none of the economists that we polled expect any change in stance before August, in fact, and the majority expect the first rate cut to only happen in October, some even later. On the macro forecast, the inflation projection is expected to be left unchanged for the year at 4.5%. Keep in mind that while inflation is moderating 4.8% in April, core inflation is providing some comfort to the MPC. The high food prices continue to remain a spot of bother. Now, on the growth front, the numbers are likely to be revised from 7% as per a majority of our respondents to somewhere between 7 to 7.5%. Now, the governor's tone is expected to be absolutely even with no real change from the last time. And finally, to end with what we started with on liquidity, the markets will watch out for any measures that the RBI may introduce later to regulate changes in liquidity from any passive inflows that happen because of index inclusions. And of course, they expect RBI to continue managing liquidity through their main and fine-tuning operations as needed.
Ritu, thanks a lot for that, and you can watch our continued coverage of the RBI monetary policy starting 9:45 a.m. onwards here on CNBC TV18. Let's get you some more political updates then. All eyes are on the NDA swearing-in ceremony, which is likely to take place on Sunday as the alliance moves ahead to form the new government. But with the allegiance also comes the question of which cabinet berths go to the allied parties. We have Parikshit to fill us in on what the JDU, the TDP and the other allies are eyeing.
It's going to take place on Sunday on 9th evening at around 7 or 7:20 in the evening. The final statement on this is yet to come from the Rashtrapati Bhavan, but things seem to be moving in that direction. For example, today, the Election Commission of India submitted a notification containing names of all those members of parliament who have won the election. The NDA leaders will meet in Parliament House, and following that, they will submit a letter of support saying that they support the BJP-led NDA alliance. We are going to see very crucial meetings on portfolios. For example, the JDU is meeting separately, TDP is holding separate meetings, the LJP is holding separate meetings. So, for example, the JDU, they've asked for about 4 cabinet berths, and they want important posts such as those related to agriculture, to rural affairs, to panchayat affairs, transport, infrastructure. So, key ministries which can help them get an edge in Bihar polls. And remember, Bihar goes to elections later next year. Now, at the same time, the TDP is also seeking important posts such as transport, infrastructure and industry ministries. They have sought at least 4 berths themselves. We've heard that both these allies may agree to 3 as well. But one thing they have insisted on, that after the government formation, the government must have a common minimum program, and anything that is contentious and that does not go down well with the people of Bihar or Andhra Pradesh must not be put in that common minimum program. So this means that we could see a major review of the Agni Path scheme, also the UCC. They have given their support to one nation, one poll. So that is something we could see some activity on if the government wants to take it forward. We are also learning that NDA allies are confident that the BJP will be able to get more independents on board. We hear that there are 5 or 6 independents that the BJP is talking about, and they could be extending support, and the NDA may be able to increase its tally beyond 300. So things moving very fast. It seems that the government wants to form the government as soon as possible. Portfolio allocations will take place very soon as well. And 7:20 p.m. on Sunday is what we're looking at as a swearing-in ceremony.
Parikshit, thanks a lot for that. Now, Congress leader Rahul Gandhi has demanded a joint parliamentary committee probe into an alleged stock market scam in the run-up to the election results. He blamed Prime Minister Modi, Home Minister Amit Shah for talking up the markets ahead of the exit polls and the counting day, and he called the exit poll results as fake.
We demand a JPC into this. We are absolutely convinced that this is a scam. Somebody has made thousands of crores of rupees at the cost of Indian retail investors, and the Prime Minister and the Home Minister have given an indication to buy. And this is a criminal act. So we demand today a joint parliamentary committee to investigate this.
And now in response, BJP leader Piyush Goyal hit back at Rahul Gandhi and said that the Congress was trying to create fear among the investors.
कि भारतीय निवेशक और उसमें भी हमारे रिटेल इन्वेस्टर्स खुदरा निवेश जो करते हैं उनको आज इसका सबसे बड़ा लाभ हुआ है। भारतीय निवेशकों की मालकियत भारत की स्टॉक मार्केट में 79% से बढ़कर आज 84% हो गई। दुनिया में आज भारत की जो मार्केट है, इक्विटी मार्केट है, इसको पूरे विश्व में आज इज्जत भी है, स्वाभिमान भी है, इसको बड़ा वेल रेगुलेटेड मार्केट माना जाता है। इसके आंकड़े दर्शाते हैं कि जो भी नोशनल लॉस की बात हो रही है वो तो वैल्यूएशन में है, और जहां तक ट्रेडिंग का सवाल है, ट्रेडिंग में भारतीय निवेशक तो ज्यादा स्मार्ट निकले और उन्होंने वो लॉस नहीं किया।
And time for a short break here on Power Breakfast. Up next, we get you cues from the commodity space. Stay tuned. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Power Breakfast, and Manisha Gupta is now joining in with all the updates from the commodity space. Manisha, good morning. What are you picking up?
Harm's morning, and the international markets in sense of commodities have seen some more gains as we head towards the U.S. non-farm payroll data today. So there's a bit of a decline in the U.S. dollar index. The U.S. ISM numbers did not come in so strong, and that seems to be supporting buying in many of these commodities. So you have the crude oil prices, which gained 2% overnight, and with the probability now that the U.S. Fed September rate cut could be at a 69%. We already have seen the Bank of Canada and European Central Bank both cut interest rates by 25 basis points in this week itself. Add to that the fact the markets also are looking at the China PMI contract numbers. That also has seen a bit of a decline coming in, and that has led to metal coming off their highs. So aluminum prices have retreated from their 2-year highs. We also have seen some pressure come in for the zinc prices. But apart from that, if you look at the other metals, there is a bit of a buying here as well, and that is because China Dragon Boat Festival starts from 8th of June, continues till 10th of June, and the markets have seen some restocking ahead of these holidays, and that really seems to be supporting iron ore and steel and copper prices at this point in time.
Manisha, thanks a lot for that. That's all the updates that we have from the commodity space. Now, in more international, or should we say out of this world news updates, Boeing's 2-member Starliner crew received a warm welcome aboard the International Space Station after a successful docking operation. Veteran astronauts Barry Wilmore and Sunita Williams made their way into the space station after a 27-hour-long journey. The launch took place despite several obstacles, including a helium propulsion leak, which NASA and Boeing said had been partially fixed and would not affect the mission. Some heartening visuals there coming in from the International Space Station. But that's all we have on this edition of Power Breakfast from me and the team that put this show together. Thank you so much for watching. Bazaar Morning Call sets you up for Friday's trade.